singing in the sycamore tree. Dream a little dream of me.
She was the kind of performer whose voice could cut through any crowd, a musical force whose onstage presence made audiences feel like they were hearing something sacred. And yet, behind the easy laugh and disarming confidence, Cass Elliot, forever remembered by her iconic moniker, Mama Cass, carried burdens that few suspected. From her first brush with fame as part of the Mamas and the Papas, to her ill-fated attempt at a Las Vegas solo act, Cass's life unfolded like a tapestry of triumphs, scandals, heartbreaks, and untold secrets. Years after her passing, rumors still swirl around her private world, fueled by the mystery surrounding her daughter's father, the sensationalist tales of how she died, and the questionable company she might have kept. At a time when popular music was blossoming with social revolution and cultural experimentation, Cass Elliot's voice emerged as an emblem of warmth and sincerity. Yet her real existence was marked by painful isolation and an endless desire for acceptance. She faced criticism for her weight at nearly every turn in an industry that prized physical perfection above all else, and she navigated chaotic love affairs that clashed with her own deep longing for commitment. This story dives into the life and legacy of Cass Elliot, tracing her path from an aspiring Broadway starlet to a chart-topping vocalist, delving into her personal sorrows, her rumored connections to scandalous figures, and the heartbreak that overshadowed her final days. By the end, we'll see how her story became both an inspiration and a cautionary tale about the cruelties of fame, the pitfalls of chasing validation, and the tragic cost of living in a world that rarely embraced her for who she was. Born Ellen Naomi Cohen on September 19, 1941, in Baltimore, Maryland, Cass Elliot seemed destined for the spotlight from a remarkably young age. Her family was of Russian Jewish heritage, striving to make ends meet in a city where opportunities often felt scarce. Despite financial struggles, Cass's parents recognized their daughter's vivacious spirit and her penchant for turning any gathering into a mini performance. Even as a child, she had a voice that drew people in, warm, boisterous, and undeniably engaging. Those who knew her as Ellen in her early days would later describe a girl who was equal parts dreamer and doer. While others her age might have settled for small local productions, Cass reveled in any chance to command a stage. She discovered a deep love of musical theater as a teen, immersing herself in plays and performing arts clubs at her high school. This was a space where her larger-than-life personality felt not just welcomed, but celebrated. Being up there under the lights, belting out show tunes or reciting lines, gave her confidence that everyday life didn't always afford. Yet, like so many rising talents, Cass quickly learned that raw ability alone was rarely enough to guarantee entry into the entertainment world. After high school, she set her sights on a Broadway career, certain that her powerful voice and comedic timing would be her ticket to stardom. But the theater world proved far less welcoming than she'd anticipated. The story goes that she lost a coveted role to a then unknown Barbra Streisand, a disappointment that cut deep. This rejection seemed to confirm a suspicion Cass had begun to harbor, that for all her gifts, she'd constantly be measured against a narrow standard of physical beauty. The same critics who admired her unique vocal style would dismiss her based on appearances, leaving her with an empty sense of having almost made it. In an era that held up slender figures like Twiggy and Audrey Hepburn as the epitome of elegance, Cass Elliot's body shape made her an outlier. She felt the stigma in every room she walked into. Casting directors would quickly look her up and down, or sometimes not look at her at all. The blow to her self-esteem was tangible, and it fueled a gnawing anxiety. Was her appearance going to keep her from achieving the dreams she'd nurtured since childhood? Rather than lose herself in discouragement, Cass looked for alternative routes. When one door closed, she'd find another, even if it meant forging a new path entirely. Musical theater's dismissal led her to a different stage, this time in the realm of folk music, where a soulful voice could shine through more freely. Her transformation from aspiring Broadway star to folk singer laid the foundation for a career that would eventually define her place in American music history. Shaken though she was by Broadway's rejection, Cass Elliot refused to relinquish her dream of performing. If her voice wasn't welcomed in theater, then perhaps it could find a home in the burgeoning folk scene. During the late 1950s and early 60s, folk music was enjoying a renaissance, with audiences craving acoustic authenticity and thought-provoking lyrics. This environment felt like fresh air for Cass, whose warm vocals and affable stage presence fit perfectly with folk's earnest style. Her first significant foray came with a group called the Big Three, formed in 1962 alongside Tim Rose and James Hendricks. While they never rose to the same level as a prominent folk acts like Peter, Paul, and Mary, the Big Three did manage to capture modest attention, performing on television and touring smaller venues. For Cass, it was a training ground, an opportunity to refine her vocal range, stage rapport, and collaborative instincts. She was not just a backup vocalist or a tentative player on stage. Her bold presence often drew more attention than the group's name itself. It was here that she began to craft a personality that could shine on its own. Yet the folk landscape was fluid and unpredictable, and the Big Three eventually disbanded, paving the way for Cass's next venture, the Mugwumps. This collective included James Hendricks, who would soon become more than just a musical collaborator, and Denny Doherty, a talented singer who would prove pivotal in Cass's life, both professionally and personally. Zal Yanovsky of The Lovin' Spoonful was also briefly part of the Mugwumps, giving the group a future star-studded lineup that, at the time, hadn't fully recognized its own potential. As the Mugwumps tried to carve a niche for themselves, Cass found her personal life growing entangled with her professional one. She married James Hendricks in 1963, but not out of romantic passion. Later reports suggest it was a maneuver to help Hendricks dodge the draft. For Cass, though, her heart had already set itself on a different target, Denny Doherty. In fact, Cass's affection for Doherty was so strong that it became an open secret among their music circle. However, her new marriage added layers of complication to an already turbulent setup. It wasn't long before the Mugwumps disbanded due to poor commercial success. Cass, still determined to make music her life's calling, watched as Denny jumped ship to join John and Michelle Phillips in a project initially known as the New Journeymen. Despite the heartbreak, Cass refused to let go of the possibility that Doherty might reciprocate her feelings one day. In her mind, the path to her desired future, both romantically and musically, still led through him. What she couldn't know was that the next few years would bring her both massive fame and profound heartbreak. She was about to become part of one of the most influential folk rock groups of the 1960s, only to find herself grappling with repeated rejection, stinging betrayals, and the scorn of someone whose acceptance she desperately craved. If she wanted to share a stage with Denny Doherty, Cass would first have to overcome a barrage of humiliations from people who felt her appearance simply didn't fit their image of a star. The seeds of the Mamas and the Papas were planted by John Phillips and Michelle Phillips, a husband and wife duo with clear ambitions to transform folk traditions into a more modern, radio-friendly rock sound. Denny Doherty joined in, bringing with him a recognizable vocal style that meshed beautifully with John's carefully crafted harmonies. One piece was missing, a bold, resonant female vocalist who could handle the deeper, more robust range the group's songs required. Despite Cass Elliot fitting that exact description, John Phillips initially resisted inviting her in. He is said to have complained that her voice was too low or too big for the refined harmonies he imagined. Yet those closer to the situation whispered the uncomfortable truth. John Phillips thought Cass Elliot's weight was a problem, a potential roadblock to the group's image. Society at the time was unkind, standards for female entertainers were impossibly thin, and Cass's physique didn't align with the archetype that record executives and managers wanted to see plastered on album covers. Cass, however, was not one to take rejection quietly. She believed with every fiber of her being that she could elevate this nascent group to unprecedented levels. Accounts vary on how she finally joined. One famous tale insists that while vacationing in the Virgin Islands with the group, Cass was struck on the head by a falling pipe. The injury, improbably enough, was said to have opened up her singing voice, granting her the higher range John Phillips was so intent on. More realistic reports say Cass leveraged the group's financial desperation. With John, Michelle, and Denny strapped for cash, she offered them a place to stay at her Los Angeles home on the condition that they let her join. Whatever the exact circumstances, Cass became the fourth member of what was soon rebranded as the Mamas and the Papas, and the music world would never be the same. From the moment they found their footing, the band captivated listeners with their lush vocal harmonies and evocative songwriting. California Dreamin' and Monday Monday soared up the charts, each capturing the essence of a rapidly changing era. Cass's voice was like a secret weapon, adding depth and warmth, and often stealing the show. With fame came an avalanche of interviews, television appearances, and throngs of passionate fans. For Cass, it seemed like a dream realized. She was on stage with the man she secretly adored, and part of a collective whose talent was indisputable. Behind the scenes, however, cracks formed. John Phillips, known for his meticulous and controlling nature, found ways to remind Cass of her perceived inferiority, mocking her weight in both casual comments and even song lyrics. The track Creekway Alley featured the line, "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass," a dig that doubled as a backhanded acknowledgement of Cass's role in the band. The nickname Mama Cass stuck, arguably helping her brand but also making her the target of jokes. Far more damaging to her emotional stability was the tension surrounding Denny Doherty. Cass's unrequited love for him persisted, but her hopes were decimated when Denny revealed he was involved in a secret affair with Michelle Phillips. The heartbreak was beyond words. Cass had joined the group partly to be near Doherty, envisioning a day he might look past the superficial judgments of the world and see her as more than a bandmate. Instead, he had chosen Michelle, a svelte, glamorous blonde whose conventional beauty was precisely the kind Cass felt she lacked. This mix of professional success and personal torment propelled Cass down a path of increasing insecurity. She began to rely more heavily on substances, seeking temporary solace from the pain of romantic rejection and the public jokes about her appearance. The upward trajectory of the Mamas and the Papas was mirrored by an equally powerful undertow of jealousy, frustration, and infighting, pressures that would soon become too immense for Cass to bear in the long run. By 1967, the fame of the Mamas and the Papas had reached a fever pitch. Their sunny melodies and harmonic layering perfectly captured the breezy spirit of California, creating an idealized image of West Coast life that millions of fans gravitated toward. Yet, within the group, tensions were running dangerously high. Cass Elliot, feeling both undervalued and emotionally drained, often contemplated a solo career. She got her first taste of going it alone when she arrived in London ahead of a scheduled band performance, hoping perhaps to relish a bit of independence. London, however, wasn't the respite she expected. Instead, Cass soon found herself detained by the local authorities over an odd accusation. She had allegedly taken bed linens from her temporary apartment. To outsiders, it sounded trivial and bizarre, but rumors indicated that the police had a deeper motive. They believed Cass might lead them to pick Dawson, reportedly a dirgy supplier and a figure of intense interest to law enforcement. Whether or not Cass was romantically involved with Dawson at the time remains cloudy, but the gossip was enough to muddy her reputation. The humiliating arrest and the subsequent night Cass spent in a London jail was a disaster for the Mama's and the Papa's public image. Already grappling with internal feuds and romantic entanglements, the band abruptly canceled their performance. The episode cast doubt on Cass's reliability, and John Phillips was furious about the negative headlines that threatened the group's pristine veneer. Behind the scenes, Cass was more disillusioned than ever. She had dreamt of forging a path where she could be seen as a star in her own right, not just a novelty figure overshadowed by John and Michelle's photogenic pairing and the constant swirl around Denny's love life. This scandal further convinced her that she needed to strike out on her own terms, away from John's controlling grip and away from the heartbreak that sharing a stage with Denny induced every single day. It didn't help that the band's dynamic had soured to the point where rehearsals felt like battlegrounds. Michelle Phillips had been temporarily kicked out for her affair with Denny, only to return later, adding a lingering tension nobody dared to fully address. John's resentment simmered. Denny, stuck in the middle, lacked direction. And Cass, publicly labeled Mama Cass, was tired of feeling like the butt of weight-related jokes. Tethered by contracts and financial obligations, the group plodded along, but everyone sensed the end was near. As cracks grew deeper, Cass took a bold step that would change her life forever and alter the trajectory of her musical career. She recorded a solo track, Dream a Little Dream of Me, which became a quiet sensation. That little taste of success gave her the push to finally leave the Mamas and the Papas for good, determined to carve out a space where she could perform without apologies or harsh judgments about her body. Freedom beckoned, but so did a new set of challenges that would test her stamina and mental health in ways she never anticipated. With Dream a Little Dream of Me earning praise and climbing the charts, Cass Elliot saw a new horizon opening before her. At last, she could imagine a career on her own terms, free from John Phillips's micromanagement and the heartbreak of watching Denny dote on Michelle. Her optimism soared when she secured a lucrative contract to perform at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, a gig that promised not only financial rewards, but the chance to headline in one of entertainment's biggest playgrounds. From the outside, this looked like the golden opportunity Cass had always wanted, but the reality proved far more complicated. Feeling an almost unbearable pressure to look the part, Cass embarked on a drastic crash diet in the months leading up to her Vegas debut. She reportedly fasted for days at a time, aiming to quickly shed weight she feared would spark ridicule among the notoriously image-conscious Las Vegas crowd. Over the course of roughly half a year, she lost an astonishing amount of weight, some say nearly 1/3 of her total body mass. This rapid transformation came at a dire cost. As her Vegas date approached, Cass was plagued by a litany of health crises: acute tonsillitis, vocal cord hemorrhages, mononucleosis, and hepatitis. Practicing her set list became almost impossible when she could barely speak without pain, let alone sing. By the time she stepped onto the stage for her first performance, she was in no condition to deliver the powerhouse vocals that had made her famous. A parade of celebrities, Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, and Mia Farrow among them, had gathered to witness Cass's historic debut. Expectations were sky high, yet as she launched into her opening number, it quickly became apparent that her weakened voice couldn't carry the notes. Attendees murmured in confusion, while critics sharpened their pencils, ready to dissect every missed pitch. Cass, normally so poised despite setbacks, was visibly struggling, and the strain on her voice was impossible to hide. After a short intermission, she tried again, performing a second show the same night, as her contract demanded. If the first performance was shaky, the second was disastrous. Many in the audience walked out, leaving Cass humiliated before the night was even over. Caesar's Palace promptly canceled the remainder of her engagement, and the press had a field day. One publication compared her ill-fated opening to the sinking of the Titanic, a cruel metaphor that only deepened her sense of failure. Privately, Cass was devastated. As she retreated from the Las Vegas limelight, she found some solace in her personal life. She had a daughter named Owen, a fact she guarded diligently from public scrutiny. She refused to name the father, igniting endless speculation among fans and the media. Some alleged it was a secret affair with a celebrated musician. Others suggested the father could be an unknown friend, hidden away from prying eyes. Many years later, her bandmate Michelle Phillips would reveal that the father was Chuck Day, the guitarist who worked on California Dreamin' and Monday, Monday. But in those days, Cass treated the subject with unwavering discretion, determined to protect her child from the same kind of scrutiny she had endured her entire life. This brief glimmer of maternal joy stood in stark contrast to her professional setbacks. Though her Las Vegas failure was demoralizing, Cass wasn't about to give up. She continued to explore television opportunities, filming variety specials like the Mama Cass television program and Don't Call Me Mama Anymore, the latter a telling title that hinted at her desire to shed the weight of her old nickname and the baggage that came with it. Yet the road ahead would remain fraught with challenges and unexpected conflicts, some of which would permanently alter public perception of the once beloved Mama Cass. As Cass Elliot settled into her new normal, balancing a fledgling solo career with the responsibilities of motherhood, she found herself entangled in yet more rumors, swirling around her personal life and her alleged circle of acquaintances. Having always enjoyed hosting lively get-togethers, Cass was known for throwing memorable parties teeming with musicians, actors, and various scenesters of the late 60s and early 70s. Her gatherings were said to be equal parts joyous jam sessions and epic late-night hangouts, where creative minds mingled without strict boundaries. It was in these very circles that one name surfaced in a way nobody could have foreseen: Charles Manson. Infamous for the horrifying crimes carried out by his followers in 1969, Manson hovered like a specter over Hollywood's elite. Rumors emerged that Cass had once welcomed Manson and his associates into her home during one of her parties, potentially introducing him to influential figures in the music business. Some even suggested Cass and Manson had a brief personal or social connection, though the exact nature of this link, if it existed at all, remains murky. What is clear is that once Manson's crimes shocked the nation, Cass faced a wave of guilt by association. John Phillips fanned these flames, allegedly accusing her of bringing Manson into their orbit, implying that her open-door approach to party invitations had inadvertently contributed to the tragedies that followed. Those accusations were never corroborated, and law enforcement showed no interest in pursuing Cass over Manson's actions. Still, the chatter stuck, staining her public image and adding another layer of scandal for tabloids to devour. During this tumultuous time, Cass also dipped her toe into another whirlwind romance. In 1971, she wed Donald von Wiedemann, a journalist and heir to a Bavarian barony, a union so brief it ended almost before it began. The marriage lasted a mere 2 months. Friends observed that Cass was chasing the elusive dream of a stable relationship, a dream that repeatedly slipped through her fingers. The heartbreak, the societal judgment, and the chronic stress from her career setbacks made it difficult for her to find lasting love or genuine peace. Amid these personal upheavals, Cass continued to record, perform on TV, and make occasional concert appearances. She had retained her quick wit and effervescent spirit, traits that shone through whenever she bantered with talk show hosts. Yet she was no stranger to heartbreak, lingering criticism of her weight, and the overshadowing effect of her mama's and papa's legacy. For every step forward in her solo career, it seemed there was always another rumor or controversy to trip her up. Though she maintained a semblance of optimism, Cass's health and emotional well-being were deteriorating, fueled by yo-yo dieting, stress-related complications, and the residual damage of years spent in an industry that saw her body type as an obstacle rather than a mere characteristic. Her final days would come abruptly, leaving fans and friends alike shocked and giving rise to one of the most persistent myths in rock history, a myth that miscast the final moments of an artist who had already endured more than enough sensationalism. By 1974, Cass Elliott's life read like a cautionary tale about the ravages of fame. She had experienced the highest of musical peaks, the humiliation of public failures, and a never-ending struggle to attain the personal happiness that eluded her. On the outside, she was still the amiable, witty Cass everyone loved, the star who had shared stages with legends, the woman who could crack a joke even in tense situations. But her body was sending ever louder alarms. That year, she appeared backstage at The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, prepared to make yet another attempt at entertaining television audiences. Suddenly, she collapsed without warning, leaving onlookers alarmed. Medical personnel arrived quickly, but Cass brushed the incident off as pure exhaustion. She had a habit of minimizing health scares, likely a combination of genuine fear and a performer's instinct to keep pushing forward. After a short recovery, she fulfilled further obligations, including a 2-week engagement at the London Palladium, an iconic venue that had hosted the biggest names in show business. Yet the unstoppable pace continued, and Cass seldom paused to catch her breath. When the Palladium run concluded, she went straight into celebrating at Mick Jagger's birthday party, and then attended a brunch thrown by actress Georgia Brown. Observers noted that Cass appeared pale, coughing frequently, and seeming slightly disoriented, but she dismissed concerns as remnants of a cold. That same evening, journalist Jack Martin hosted another gathering in Cass's honor. Typically, Cass was the spark that lit up any room, regaling friends and acquaintances with stories and witty banter. Instead, she looked worn out and more reserved than usual, prompting quiet worry among those who cared for her. After the party, Cass returned to an apartment in Mayfair, owned by singer-songwriter Harry Nilsson, where she was staying as a guest. The next day, when she failed to emerge from her room, her secretary became alarmed. The door was opened to a sight that nobody ever wants to face. Cass Elliot had passed away in her sleep at the age of 32, with the official cause of death attributed to heart failure. What followed was one of the cruelest examples of rumor overshadowing truth. Tabloid headlines screamed that Mama Cass choked on a ham sandwich, a story fueled by the discovery of a partially eaten sandwich near her bedside. This rumor, devoid of any real evidence, clung to her legacy with shocking tenacity. It fed into public stereotypes about her weight, reducing her final moments to a lurid punchline that overshadowed her actual cause of death. A heart attack likely triggered by years of crash dieting and the overall strain her body had endured. Oddly enough, a second tragedy added macabre weight to the rumor mill. The Who drummer, Keith Moon, died in the exact same room, at the same age of 32, 4 years after Cass. This coincidence gave the apartment an eerie reputation in rock history. But no matter how many times doctors and friends of Cass explained the reality of her death, the ham sandwich myth endured, a final indignity for a woman whose talent so deserved a more respectful obituary. In the aftermath of Cass's sudden passing, her young daughter Owen was cared for by Cass's younger sister, Leah Cohen. While friends and loved ones mourned the gaping absence left by Cass's dynamic presence, the media continued to churn out half-truths and sensational angles on her life. Through it all, the question of Owen's paternity persisted, as Cass had steadfastly kept that detail private. Many speculated it was a musician from her Hollywood circle, some guessed an industry executive. It wasn't until years later that Michelle Phillips definitively confirmed that Chuck Day, a guitarist who played on multiple Mamas and the Papas hits, was the father of Cass's child. This revelation offered a rare note of resolution in the swirl of mysteries that had characterized Cass's life. For fans, it was further proof of how fiercely Cass had guarded her loved ones from the same tabloid intrusions that tormented her. She had chosen to be a public figure, but she never wanted her daughter to face scrutiny over paternal identity, particularly when Cass herself was relentlessly criticized for her looks, her relationships, and her lifestyle. As the years passed, critics, fellow musicians, and fans began to reevaluate Cass Elliott's contributions to popular music. When the Mamas and the Papas were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, surviving members performed California Dreamin' on stage. They reportedly needed 3 backing vocalists to replicate the power Cass had provided on her own, a poignant testament to the magnitude of her gift. In October 2022, Cass was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, attended by family and friends who felt the tribute was long overdue. The ceremony served as a reminder that, beneath all the gossip and heartbreak, this woman possessed a singular talent that shaped a generation of folk rock music. Looking back, Cass Elliott's tale is as inspiring as it is tragic. She faced consistent body shaming in an era unwilling to accept diverse shapes and sizes as beautiful. She wrestled with unrequited love and harsh betrayals. She fought to protect her child from public scrutiny, even as tabloids circled like vultures. Yet she stood before sold-out crowds, delivered chart-topping hits, and forged her own path, even if the ultimate cost proved devastating to her health. The posthumous accolades are bittersweet, given how desperately she sought acceptance and respect during her lifetime, but perhaps it's fitting to remember Cass Elliot for what she accomplished rather than what she lacked. She was a pioneer of vocal harmonies that have stood the test of time, a spirited performer who broke through barriers, and a loving mother who found solace in her daughter when the world felt too harsh. In the final measure, those achievements far outweigh the cruel jokes or sensational rumors that try to overshadow her legacy. Cass Elliott's life embodied the paradox of fame, a meteoric rise to stardom coupled with a personal reality filled with struggles, heartbreak, and relentless criticism. She went from a Baltimore child, star in the making, to an integral force within one of the most iconic American folk rock groups of the 1960s. Her voice, brimming with warmth and nuance, became the trademark sound that propelled the Mamas and the Papas to the top of the charts. Yet while fans adored her, Cass confronted the kind of scorn that often goes hand in hand with an industry still bound by rigid beauty norms. Behind every exuberant performance was a woman yearning for acceptance, romantic acceptance from Denny Doherty, professional acceptance from John Phillips, and public acceptance from a culture that too often wrote her off because of her body. The heartbreaks, failed romances, and toxic gossip took a toll that manifested in extreme dieting and frequent medical scares. Despite it all, Cass refused to stop singing. She remained determined to push her career forward, whether that meant performing solo, hosting her own television specials, or even trying her luck in the unforgiving waters of the Las Vegas entertainment scene. In her final days, Cass attempted to keep up the same pace that had characterized her entire life, attending parties, celebrating with friends, and looking after her own professional commitments. Tragically, her heart gave out before she had the chance to realize all the dreams she still harbored. The tabloid fiction that emerged afterward, that she choked on a ham sandwich, only underscored how cruelly the media could trivialize a performer's complexity and struggles. Yet time has brought a measure of justice to her memory. The belittling rumors have largely fallen away, replaced by a broader understanding of her monumental influence and a deeper empathy for her personal battles. Posthumous honors, including her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, reflect the world's gradual recognition that Cass Elliot was more than just Mama Cass. She was a fiercely talented individual who helped define the sound of a decade. Her distinct vocals continue to captivate new listeners, reminding us that genuine artistry defies narrow standards of appearance or social acceptance. Ultimately, Cass Elliott's story stands as both a testament to the power of resilience and a sobering commentary on the dangers of chasing love and validation in the public eye. To this day, her recordings echo across generations, capturing a voice that is at once joyous, haunting, and entirely unforgettable. She may have carried great secrets to her grave, but her larger truth, that talent can bloom in even the most hostile conditions, endures. And for anyone who's ever felt their dreams might be out of reach, Cass Elliott's legacy stands as an encouraging reminder that an extraordinary voice, combined with unwavering determination, can carve out a place in history despite all the odds.